He was completely immersed, absorbed in worshiping the Lord with just some leaves and flowers and water. And that's all he ate. He just ate some leaves and flowers and drank some water. The Mahaprasad of the Lord. And by doing that worship, he became so purified. He was only wearing deer skin. He was just sleeping on the riverbank. Soon, he was in so much love for Krishna. Krishna was reciprocating so much. He was always chanting mantras too. When he would see the sunrise, he would offer from the Rig Veda beautiful prayers in honor of Vishnu, who's the presiding Lord in the sun, who through the sun gives life, light, and everything that we survive on. The Gayatri Mantra is an offering of our love, our gratitude, our prayers to Krishna, who appears to us in this universe as the sun. Krishna says in Gita, I am the light of the sun and the moon. But factually, the sun provides everything for life. We're so ungrateful. Sun rises, we put on sunglasses. What you call goggles, or whatever you call them in India. Don't bother me, son, get out of my eyes. I'm walking in the nice sun in Vrindavan, and people come with these umbrellas. Let me cover you, let me shade you. The sun is this way. Anyways, it's interesting because the sun is very... Are you leaving now? Huh? Okay, thank you. The sun is the source of all life. In a sense, it's the sustainer of life. It's the sun that evaporates the ocean water and makes it into clouds, or bring rain, gives heat. And it's Vishnu, it's Krishna within the sun that's providing for all of us. So he would worship the Lord in the sun, he would worship the Lord everywhere. He was seeing Krishna in everything. He wasn't seeing that everything was Krishna, but he was seeing that Krishna was in everything. There's a very, very crucial difference between the two. Krishna tells in Gita, I am everywhere in and everything, but everything is not me. That means Krishna is in it, he's the source of it, but still he is beyond it. He's the origin of everything that exists. Just as the sun planet provides sun rays that reach everywhere, but still the sun planet is the sun rays, but at the same time is not. And Bharat, he was fully absorbed in worshiping Krishna in everything. And he would weep and cry in ecstasy when he would offer little leaves to Krishna. His hairs would stand on end. His body would tremble because Krishna was reciprocating with those leaves that were offered with devotion. One day, early in the morning, after he took his bath in the Gandaki River and performed his morning duties, he was sitting in his meditation. And a female deer, a doe, she came just close to him to drink the water. As she was drinking, we were supposed to get scared. You're laughing at me. A lion roared. And when that lion roared, the deer usually get eaten by lions. So she became so frantically afraid for her life. Without even a second thought, instinctively, she leapt across the river. And because that lion's roar scared her so much, she was pregnant. She had a miscarriage as she was going across the river. And the little deer fell in the water. She was on the other side, and deers can't swim. They could jump. There was absolutely nothing she could do for her little baby. She was scared because of the lion. It was so traumatic. Now she was away from all the rest of the deers in her family. And her little baby was on the verge of death. And there was nothing she could do about it. That mother deer was so totally heartbroken. She lay down on the ground and gave up her life. Bharat was chanting his mantras, doing his meditation, worshiping the Lord, and he sees the mother's dead. And then right beside him, floating in the water, is this newborn baby little deer on the verge of drowning to death. Bharat felt so much sympathy and compassion, he reached down and picked up the little baby. Put him on the ground. Now that he saved the deer out of compassion, was it any better? The deer can't survive without a mother. Where was he going to get food? Who was going to protect it from the lions and the wolves and the jackals and the boars? So Bharat understood, I have to be the father, the mother, the caretaker of this deer. So he started collecting grass and feeding the deer. The little deer ate the grass. Very happy. He was really making a difference in the life of this deer. Then he would take the deer for walks. The deer would follow. Wherever he would go, the deer would follow behind. Little baby deer. They're so nice, sweet little people. And the little deer was totally dependent on Bharat. So everywhere he went, he would go, and Bharat would sit for meditation, and the deer with her wet, warm nose would go toot, 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 toot. And because, of his affection for the deer, it felt so nice that he would stop meditating, and the deer had an itch, so Bharat would scratch the itch. The deer wanted special grass, Bharat would get special grass. In this way, he started taking care of the deer. And soon, the deer demanded so much of his attention that he had no time for seva. There was no time to worship the Lord. There was no time to chant mantras. There was no time for doing his meditations, his pujas. actually there was time. But he just didn't understand. He became attached. And soon, even he understood. He was a very extremely intelligent man. He was thinking that this deer is completely dependent on me, and he's so nice, and I like him so much, and I know I'm giving up my meditation and my puja and all of my spiritual practices, but it's justified because of my totally unselfish affection to protect this deer, God's little deer. And sometimes the deer would take a walk and not come home on time. And he was beside himself, worrying with grief. Where is my deer? Where is my deer? He'd be searching, calling out the deer's name, asking the sun and the moon whether they saw the deer. Srila Prabhupada explains in our acharyas, Sukadev Goswami, that to take care of someone in need is wonderful. But we should never lose the focus of the real need. The real need of every living being is the need of the soul to be liberated from suffering. Because on a physical level or emotional level, whatever help you give a person, it's only a temporary band-aid at the best. Srila Prabhupada would often say, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, that the real problems of life are birth, old age, disease, and death. Unless we solve these problems, whatever else we do, it's just a temporary relief, but there's no solution. You feed a hungry person, they're going to be hungry the next day. You heal a sick man, woman, they're going to get sick. And eventually, they're going to grow old and they're going to die. And padam yadvi padam natesham, we don't even know when that's going to happen. It could happen today or tomorrow, no matter what we do for anybody. So philanthropy, simply based on the body of mind, it's the mode of goodness. But a transcendentalist does those things, but all for the purpose of ultimately harmonizing it with the liberation of the soul. So Bharat was not wrong in being sympathetic and compassionate and saving that deer's life. It's not that the deer is drowning and going by and Bharat is just, you're in Maya, dear. And the deer's about to drown to death and looking with helpless, piteous eyes at Bharat, please save me. And Bharat says, you are not this body. It's the way devotees could get sometimes. So it was right of him to take the deer out. But what was wrong is he lost his balance. And he became so engrossed in the bodily philanthropic care of the deer that he forgot his own spiritual practice and he forgot what he needed to do to liberate the deer's beautiful eternal soul. And that was a disaster, the greatest loss. If you don't have something, you can't give something. If we're Krishna conscious, we could give Krishna conscious. If we have love of God, we could give love of God. If somebody's drowning, you have to know to swim if you want to help them. So Bharat's mistake was simply he was distracted from the essence. And with any type of altruism, philanthropy, or charitable work, that tendency is there. That we can become so engrossed in the physical and emotional problems and sufferings of people that we forget about our own soul and we forget about their souls. That's what Bharat did. He fell from all of his spiritual practices and simply became attached to the deer. And in due course of time, death approached. And as he was dying, that little deer was sitting next to him, and he was looking at the deer. Oh, I'm being taken away from you. And he died, totally immersed in thoughts of his dear. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram. Krishna tells in Gita, what our consciousness is at the time of death, we attain that. So Bharat woke up and had the body of a deer. A baby deer. Little baby deer. But because neha bikramana sosti pratyavayo navidyate swalpamapyasya dharamasya trayate mahato bhayat. Any spiritual progress we make is never lost. Bharat, he actually had attained a state of bhava, of love for Krishna, but it wasn't yet perfected. Once you attain the state of prema, the mature level of bhava, at that time, you're completely absorbed in your natural constitutional position in ecstatic love for Krishna. So because of his previous life of so much devotional service and so much remembrance of Krishna and chanting Krishna's names, he had the exact same consciousness as he did, with full awareness of everything he did in his past life as a deer. Here's another example. You can't just see by looking at something. Anybody who saw that little deer just saw a little deer. But what they didn't understand, within the mind of that deer was the great scholar, King Bharat, who became a yogi and ascetic and attained 99% perfection. And that was all there. And he realized, what a fool I was. Helping the deer that was appropriate. But to give up my service to God, to forget the spiritual nature of myself and the deer, that was ignorance. So he did not want to associate with anything except what would bring him to Krishna. So just after his birth, he left home and went to the same place, the Pulaha forest, on the banks of the Gandaki River. And there he would just listen to great sages and saints chanting mantras. The little deer would just listen. And he was totally immersed in meditating on Krishna, Narayan. And he just waited and waited. And in due course of time, he gave up his life, totally absorbed in Krishna. And Krishna wanted to teach the world some good lessons. So he took his next birth in a Brahmin family. And people called him Jadabharata. His father was a very great learned Brahmin. And he was extraordinarily different. one little phone makes everyone so happy. Devotees are so simple. Jadabharata, he total had remembrance of his life as a deer, as his life as an ascetic, as the life of a king. And he didn't want to be distracted by anything. So like his father, from his childhood, he was like an avaduta. Because he didn't want anyone to appreciate him. He didn't want any attachments. So he would do everything different than everyone else. They would teach him how to do something, he would do it the opposite way. And he would hardly ever say a single word. Typical example. His father taught him, when you respond to nature, after you do it, you wash with this water. So Bharat would wash with the water until all the water was used up, and then he would respond to nature. His father said, no, not like this, like this. And then he would do it again the same way. No, not like this, like this. And he would maybe do something different the way he washed himself, but then he would do it, he would respond afterward. And his brothers were watching. This brother of ours is a crazy person. He's stupid, he's ignorant. And they hated him. And he loved them. But his love was different. He loved their souls. But again, they were judging him on these superficial, external, physical considerations. And ultimately the father, who loved him and was patient with him and gave him every chance, and the father never gave up on him. Ultimately the father died. And the brothers, what are we going to do with this brother? We know the story. There was a field and they wanted to keep the crows away, so they just had him standing there. And he would just do what anybody said. Just stand here, you fool. And he just stood there. He was so compassionate. The crows probably liked him. But then some dacoits kidnapped him. And they thought, they brought him to their dacoit king, and he was going to do some puja to Kali, a human sacrifice. And Jadabharata was very much like his father when he became an avaduta. He was very beautiful, he was very strong, but he just didn't relate to society in a conventional way. So they thought he was a madman, but he had a very good body. Oh, this is fine. We will sacrifice you to the goddess. Okay. And he didn't resist. He didn't try to escape. He totally, Krishna, whatever you want to do with me, I am yours. That was his internal consciousness. So they bathed him and they dressed him up and they put him on the altar. He knew what was happening. He wasn't dumb. He was absolutely, transcendentally enlightened. But he was totally surrendered. So they put him on the altar, and the priest came with a big sword that was meant to cut off his head. He just looked up. They raised the sword in front of the deity of the goddess, and he was ready to go. Goddess Kali, from the deity, she screamed. She grabbed the sword and chopped off the head of the priest, who were rolling and bloody, and then she took the sword and she cut off the dacoit chief's head, and then all the other dacoits started running around, and Kali started manifesting all these different forms, and they were all grabbing the dacoits and cutting off their heads, and then they were taking their heads and playing throwing their heads to each other, screaming, till the whole gang of all the dacoits were finished. And Jadabharata just like standing, no emotions. He surrendered whatever Krishna wants. He was just flowing with the river of Krishna's grace in whatever way. He was so absorbed internally in fulfillment, that life or death or Goddess Kali, whatever happens, he was such a foundation of ecstasy, meditating on Krishna in his heart. And then Goddess Kali, all the forms came back into her, and the goddess offered her obeisances and her blessings to Jadabharata, because she recognized that he is a Mahatma. He is a true saint. So he left. He didn't put this incident on his website or anything. They didn't have websites in those days. But it's not that he broadcasted what Kali did for him. It wasn't like that. He just went and started walking like an avaduta through the forests. And the king, Rahugana, the king of the world, was actually, a descendant of Jadabharata. There was Bharat Maharaja, yes, he was a king. He didn't understand that the greatest king that ever lived was this avaduta. He just saw him as, he was being carried on a palanquin, and one of the palanquin carriers was injured, so they had to find somebody else, somebody who was strong. So it just so happened that Jadabharata happened to walk by just in his transcendental days of bhakti, and they grabbed him by force. You be palanquin carrier. All right. So they put him in the palanquin. He was very strong looking. And they started going, palanquin carriers, there's 4 of them. You have to be synchronized. It's very important. If anybody's independent of the others, it creates terrible disturbance. So they're walking, and the king's on the palanquin. All of a sudden, everything is shaken around. The palanquin is, some people are going one way, other people another way. The palanquin's tipping over, and what's happening? The king is, what is this? What is this? And everybody's pointing at him, Jadabharata. Jadabharata didn't say anything. But what he was thinking in his mind is he was carrying it. He was cooperating very nicely. But then an ant crossed the path. May have even been many ants. And he would not step on an ant. Amanina manadena. Mahaprabhu has told us, offer all respect to others, do not expect respect for oneself. He had that consciousness to such an extent that he honored even an ant as much as he honored the king. Because he was a king, and he was a deer. He was so many things. So with his realizations and experiences, he didn't want to injure the ant. So he stopped walking. But the other carriers, they weren't looking for ants. So the king chastised him. Said, if you do that again, you'll be punished. Jadabharata. Palanquin walked, another ant. He stops. Everyone else is moving very fast because the king wanted to get to her. They're all walking really fast. And stops. And everything gets shaken up. And they all point to, the king said, I'm going to punish all of you. He said, don't punish us, it's him. He's ignorant, he's a fool, he keeps stopping, he's disobedient. The king chastises him. I will kill you if you do that again. Practically like that. He was really mad. Jadabharata takes it. There was a lot of ants in those days. Like today. He stopped again. And the king was chastising him so bad, calling him all bad names. And then for the first time in his life, Jadabharata spoke to somebody. Can you imagine? He was a grown man. First time in his life he was willing to speak. And what came out of his mouth? He was speaking to the emperor, Rahugana. He said, you are calling me your servant, your slave, and you are calling yourself the king, but in your next life I may be the king, you may be the slave. What is this body that you're so attached to? What is this ego that I am a king, I am a carrier? We are all eternal souls. When we get bound up by the misconceptions of these external, physical, mental identities, and we forget who we really are, we become victim to so much bondage and suffering. He spoke such beautiful, transcendental knowledge, like the king had never heard before. Maharaj Rahugana came off of his palanquin and prostrated himself in total surrender at the feet of his own palanquin carrier. He said, you are my guru. I beg forgiveness for whatever I've said to you. I surrender to you. And then the king started asking him the highest, deepest, most important questions that every human being needs to resolve in their life. And he sat in total submission as Jadabharata instructed him. Maharaj Rahugana was completely enlightened. He knew exactly what was to be done in life. He understood what is Krishna, what is bhakti, what is the highest goal, what is attachment, and what is detachment. And after this beautiful historical conversation, the king honored and worshipped Jadabharata. And Jadabharata just went into his mood of an avadhuta again, went back into the forest. What an example this was for Maharaj Rahugana as he watched. The greatest saint, the greatest scholar on earth, doesn't want anything for himself. He was just waiting for someone to open their hearts to hear from him. And he became perfect. These stories from Srimad Bhagavatam, from other scriptures, reveal such essential truths to us. What we should be striving for, what we should be prioritizing, what we should be careful to avoid. And most of all, how to properly balance our perceptions in this world. Krishna tells in Gita, for one who sees me everywhere and everything in me, I'm never lost, nor is that person ever lost to me. in the association of devotees, with our sadhana, with our regulative principles, they are all extremely necessary to cultivate this consciousness where we could see Krishna everywhere and everything in Krishna. Then we're free of envy, we're free of fear, we're free of doubt. Cheto darpana marajanam bhava mahadavagni nivapanam. Anandam buddhivardhanam. When the heart is cleaned through the practice of these principles of bhakti, then we taste the ecstasy we're always anxious for. But whoever we are, at whatever level we're at, we should always feel that humility, that I need the association of devotees. I need to absorb myself in the holy names every day. I need to absorb myself in Srimad Bhagavatam and these great scriptures. Because there's danger at every step in this world, physically, emotionally, and also spiritually. So if we have that strong spiritual foundation and the proper character and the proper attitude, seeking the essence, seeking the goal, avoiding offenses as far as possible, Krishna will always protect us. And even if we slip up, if we're sincere in striving, Krishna will be there to pick us up, as he did Bharat Maharaj, as he will do for any sincere devotee. So let us be grateful, enthusiastic, determined, and chant the holy name.
His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, our beloved spiritual master, referred to his disciples when they came to India as his dancing white elephants. So when we come to India, it is nice if we dance a little bit, and it can be of some interest to see how these Westerners are able to take up this process of Krishna Bhakti from Bharatvash. Hare Krishna. Now I won't speak for very long, I would think a minute or two, because I, like you, have been sitting on the wooden floor and I know how it feels. And I don't think I'll attempt too many roars like Maharaj. Rah! Briefly, I will just say what a great pleasure it is for me to be in your association, in the association of the very wonderful devotees of Srila Prabhupada. I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you're taking so seriously to this process, and I look forward to visiting many, many times for spiritual rejuvenation and also to render some service to all of you. I would like that very much. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I know Nietzsche, how do I say the name again? I've lost the name. Nietzsche Ditya Prabhu has something very important to say, so I will pass them on to you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
It's just amazing. It is amazing to be here with all of you. And last night's festival was there's no really words to describe the feeling that I had, that I was in the spiritual world, dancing with the devotees and sharing love, sprinkling those flower petals on each other after the whole day was just so perfect. This kind of experience it's invaluable for our progressive march in Krishna consciousness. These festivals and satsangs are embedded into our hearts. This is the reason why these kind of festivals are very important, these kind of gatherings, because I can just speak for myself. My brain is so filled with so many memories of material life that the only way to get them out is to overflow them with the memories of spiritual experiences. And the experience we had last night, I'm hoping that will put me over the edge to become a devotee again. It's just, I think the big lesson we had from the lectures last day was, we can't judge a book by its cover. We can't judge a person by their looks. We have to go deep and become serious about our chanting, about our hearing, and application of Krishna consciousness. It's so important because we can be chanting for years and years and years unless we have a real desire to apply the teachings. Then we just remain shallow devotees. We see only the surface. So I came to India to become surcharged. This trip is a break for me, to become surcharged and to refocus my attention on the spiritual message of Srila Prabhupada, which is to focus ourselves on becoming lovers of Krishna. And love is it's a very deep word. We use it so cheaply, but loving Krishna is a very deep experience that is gained through tremendous austerities, practice, and ultimately the desire to have that love. So I'm indebted to Radhanath Maharaj from the very beginning of my Krishna consciousness. He was there showing what love of Krishna is. I have the great fortune of being able to serve Radha Vrindavan Nath, Radha Krishna forms at New Vrindavan every Wednesday. I go on the altar. That's a chance to enter into the spiritual world, and whatever feelings I have or whatever experience I have toward them, these are really the reflections of what the experiences I had worshiping Radha Vrindavan Nath with Radhanath Maharaj on that lonely mountain on a hill. It wasn't so lonely. I mean, it was Krishna was there. So carrying me forward again here at this wonderful temple that you've manifested out of one tiny little room when we first came here. It's just one tiny little room. It's just such a masterpiece. And not just an artistic masterpiece, it's a devotional masterpiece. And I am just so humbled at seeing Radhanath Maharaj's accomplishments from our early days of just milking cows at New Vrindavan and trying to cook a little feast together for their lordships. You've made such a wonderful feast by offering all these beautiful souls to the lotus feet of Radha Gopinath, and I am extremely humbled by your devotional service, and I pray that I'm able to remain in your association as your friend and servant. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Kaustuba Prabhu, you'd like to speak something? Come, please. Yes, yes. Kaustuba Prabhu is a very dear disciple of His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. No. Please. Right here. Yes. Okay.
Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I'm also very grateful, Maharaj, for your association and for the association of all the devotees here. And I definitely won't speak very long, so I'll just try to share just a little bit of that appreciation. And I for a fallen soul myself, I feel very, sometimes Krishna feels near at special times when devotees can create, when their devotion manifests in beautiful ways like last night. But most of the time in my life, I'm forgetful, and in one sense, I feel very distant from Krishna. But through Maharaj's association, personal association, or hearing him speak, I feel through him Krishna's qualities coming through. And that's in one sense, that's how I experience Krishna. But I also see that here in this very special place, in all of the world, I feel that through Maharaj's influence and his mercy, that I feel through all of you, I see those same qualities. I see Maharaj's qualities come through, which are ultimately those beautiful qualities that Krishna has manifesting in this whole community. So I'm always so grateful, myself and my wife Gita Priya, who is somewhere out here. We feel so grateful to be able to return here regularly and receive darshan of Krishna through all of you. So thank you all so very much, and please allow us to come back again and again.